The sound that shattered Lucas Jones' home wasn't thunder nor a fire alarm. It was far simpler and infinitely more destructive: laughter. A deep, rich, disdainful laugh that echoed through the polished mahogany auditorium. The laugh belonged to Francesco Silva, the billionaire, the icon, the man whose face graced the magazine covers Lucas used to meticulously arrange by color on his bedroom shelf, and that laugh was directed at him. The microphone in his hand seemed to freeze, the cold metal transmitting a vibration that climbed his arm and settled in his chest like a block of ice. The stage lights, previously a mere annoyance, were now needles piercing his eyes. Every murmur in the audience felt like sandpaper on his skin. He could feel the seam of his shirt collar tightening, scratching, suffocating him. His 200-page business plan, brimming with predictive algorithms and market analyses unseen by anyone else, now felt like trash. All that remained was that laugh, ricocheting off the walls of his mind. Before we continue Lucas's journey, quickly tell us what city or country you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories reach. And if you don't want to miss the unfolding of narratives like this, which show how life can take unexpected turns, click the subscribe button right now. Believe me, you'll want to know how this ends. Lucas's mother, Mila Carvalho, used to say he saw the world in code, while other children saw clouds and imagined animals. Lucas saw vapor dispersion patterns and tried to calculate the probability of rain. For him, the universe wasn't a poem, it was an elegantly complex equation waiting to be solved. From a young age, he didn't communicate with easy words or spontaneous hugs. His language was made of building blocks, organized by color, size, and density, of long silences while his mind processed the sensory chaos of the outside world, and of intense monologues about bird migration patterns or the mathematics behind a flower's petals. Mila learned to decipher this language. A perfect alignment of toy cars in the living room meant he was calm and focused. A low hum and a rocking back and forth was his overload signal, a silent plea for the world to turn down the volume. The autism diagnosis came late, after years of empty labels: shy, eccentric, challenging. For Mila, the diagnosis wasn't a sentence, it was a map. Finally, she had a compass to navigate her son's world. But the map didn't make the terrain less rugged. School was a succession of silent battles. Well-meaning teachers tried to force him to make eye contact, not understanding that for Lucas, looking someone in the eyes was like staring at the sun. Peers excluded him from playground games, confused by his brutal honesty and his inability to grasp the nuances of a joke. One boy in particular, Jack Martin, seemed to have it as a personal mission to torment him, mocking his peculiar interests and repetitive movements. Mila spent nights researching, reading, trying to build bridges between Lucas's world and the world that insisted he should be different. She became his translator, his advocate, his fortress. "They don't understand the beauty of your mind, my son," she whispered as she helped him organize his books alphabetically by author, a ritual that calmed him after a difficult day. "But one day, they will see. They need to see." Lucas didn't respond with words, but he would subtly lean against her shoulder, a gesture that, for them, was worth more than any declaration of love. He found refuge in numbers. Numbers didn't lie. They had no ulterior motives. They were predictable, logical, safe. While the social world was an indecipherable foreign language, the stock market was a symphony of patterns. He started following stock quotes at 12, using his allowance to buy fractional shares. He didn't see graphs of ups and downs. He saw ecosystems, flows of human behavior translated into pure data. He could predict small fluctuations with an accuracy that was frightening. His mind, which stumbled in casual conversation, danced nimbly through spreadsheets and financial reports. This was his true language, the only one in which he was truly fluent. The transition to university was, at once, a liberation and a new form of imprisonment. The liberation came in the form of advanced economics and finance courses, where his mind finally found challenges worthy of it. One professor in particular, Arthur Greco, a man with graying hair and a kind gaze, was the first to see beyond Lucas's social awkwardness. He saw the raw brilliance in the young man's work, the originality of his predictive models. "Lucas," Professor Greco said one day, after reading an 80-page analysis the boy had written on the volatility of emerging markets, "you don't think like others. And that, my boy, is your greatest asset." It was the first time someone had called his difference an asset. The word echoed in his mind, a welcome counterpoint to the laughter and pitying glances that had accompanied him throughout his life. The imprisonment, however, remained the same. The need to present, to socialize, to network. The academic world, and by extension the corporate world, valued performance as much as content, and Lucas didn't perform. He just was. His existence was his presentation, and for most, it was a confusing and uncomfortable one. Hope, when it arrived, had the deceptive shimmer of a mirage in the desert. It was during his final year of university. The business department announced a prestigious competition, the Great Innovation Challenge. The prize was a full scholarship for a master's program, and more importantly, the chance to present his project to a panel of legendary investors. At the center of the panel, like a sun around which all other planets orbited, was Francesco Silva. The news electrified the campus. For Lucas, it was terrifying and irresistible. He spent months immersed in his project. It wasn't just a business plan, it was the culmination of his entire life of observation, an investment analysis system based on unconventional data patterns, from social media trends to weather data and global logistics reports. He called it Nexus. It was complex, revolutionary, and in his mind, infallible. Myla helped him prepare. They practiced the presentation dozens of times in the living room. She helped him choose a suit that didn't scratch, find shoes that didn't pinch. She reminded him to breathe. Just show them what you see, Lucas. Show them the code of the world. Professor Greco also supported him, reviewing his data and encouraging him. The logic is irrefutable, Lucas. Let the numbers speak for you. But hope began to crumble the moment he stepped onto the stage. The lights were too bright. The silence of the audience was heavy, expectant. He tried to start with the anecdote Mila had helped him rehearse. But the words came out robotic, disjointed. He skipped the introduction and plunged straight into the data, his voice monotonous, his gaze fixed on a point on the back wall. He spoke of correlations and standard deviations, of machine learning algorithms and black swans. The audience, accustomed to charismatic presentations and catchy slogans, grew restless. Whispers began to spread. Francesco Silva, sitting at the center of the judges' table, leaned back in his chair, a smirk forming on his lips. He exchanged an amused glance with the judge next to him. Lucas felt the shift in the atmosphere. The air became denser, harder to breathe. He sped up, desperately trying to reach the conclusion, the point where everyone would understand the genius behind the clumsy presentation. That's when Francesco interrupted him. "Young man," he said, his voice amplified by the microphone, dripping with condescension. "With all due respect, what you're presenting is an interesting academic exercise. But in the real world," he paused for effect, "it's not worth the paper it's printed on. You're not selling a product. You're reciting a textbook." And then he laughed, the laugh that broke Lucas. The audience, taking their cue from the billionaire, joined him in a chorus of chuckles and whispers. Lucas stopped speaking. He looked at the faces in front of him, faces blurred by the tears that were starting to form in his eyes. He saw pity, he saw mockery, he saw incomprehension. The false. Hope disintegrated, leaving behind only the raw pain of humiliation. He mumbled an almost inaudible "thank you" and left the stage, leaving behind his laptop, his notes, and the pieces of his confidence. That night marked rock bottom. The pain wasn't just from the public humiliation, it was the confirmation of his greatest fear, that no matter how brilliant his mind was, the world would always judge him by the packaging, and his was irredeemably flawed. The conflict that followed wasn't noisy, but internal and devastating. Lucas shut down. He stopped going to class. The numbers, once his friends, now seemed to mock him from their spreadsheets. The equation of the world, which he thought he was beginning to solve, suddenly had no solution. Mila tried to reach him, leaving trays of food at his door, speaking through the wood with a soft, encouraging voice. "This doesn't define you, Lucas. That man, he didn't see, but that doesn't mean it's not there." Professor Greco called several times, leaving voicemails that Lucas listened to but didn't answer. "Don't let an arrogant ignoramus destroy years of brilliant work, boy. Wall Street is full of people like him, but there are also people who value substance, not spectacle." The social pressure was immense. His classmates commented on the incident in the hallways, some with pity, others with a sense of superiority. Lucas became the weird guy who got humiliated by Francesco Silva. The story became a campus anecdote. The dilemma was unbearable. To succeed, he needed to become someone he wasn't. He needed to learn to smile when he didn't feel like it, to make small talk about trivial matters, to sell his ideas with the charisma of a showman. It was like asking a fish to learn to climb a tree. Each attempt to fit in left him exhausted, anxious, and with an overwhelming sense of failure. He went to a few job interviews at local investment banks. In all of them, the result was the same. They praised his resume, his impressive grades, but in the face-to-face conversation, he failed. He couldn't maintain eye contact. His answers were direct and without embellishment, and when he got nervous, he started reciting market statistics. The interviewers looked at him with a mixture of confusion and discomfort. He was an enigma they didn't have the time or the inclination to decipher. The financial world, he realized, was an exclusive club, and the entry fee wasn't just intelligence, it was a specific type of social intelligence that he simply didn't possess. That human conflict, the struggle between his authentic nature and the world's expectations, was tearing him apart. He wasn't a misunderstood villain. Francesco Silva wasn't a cartoon monster. He was just a product of a system that values charisma above all else. And Lucas was outside that system, looking in, his face pressed against glass that seemed unbreakable. The turning point didn't come with a bang, but with the quiet sound of an email arriving. Weeks after the disastrous presentation, when Lucas had already resigned himself to a future of obscurity, a message appeared in his inbox. The sender was from a domain he didn't recognize. The subject was simple: your Nexus model. He hesitated before opening it. Maybe it was another joke, someone else wanting to mock him. But curiosity won. The message was short and direct, without effusive greetings or small talk. "Mr. Holm, my name is Isabella Carter. I am head of quantitative analysis at the Sterling Group in New York. I was in the audience during your presentation at the university. I would like to see the raw data and the complete methodology behind your model. Confidentiality guaranteed." Lucas read the email 5 times. There wasn't a hint of pity or condescension in the text, only a direct and professional interest in his work. He looked up her name. Isabella Carter was a respected figure on Wall Street, known for her rigorous, data-driven approach and for her aversion to analysts who relied more on instinct than evidence. She was, in essence, the antithesis of Francesco Silva. A small flame of hope, something he thought had been extinguished forever, flickered within him. With trembling hands, he attached his 200-page work and clicked send. The response came in less than an hour. "Interesting. Can you identify the trigger for the anomaly in the 2018 commodities market? Our models failed." Lucas spent the entire night working. He plunged into the data, the outside world disappearing. His mind was home, dancing among the numbers. He found the pattern, a subtle correlation between weather patterns in South America and fluctuations in cargo ship traffic that everyone else had ignored. He sent his analysis back, a concise and dense explanation. Isabella's response was even shorter. Hired, a 3-month trial contract. Your plane ticket is attached. We need you in New York on Monday. Your office will be a quiet space, as you seem to prefer. It was a silent turning point without applause or public recognition. It was a hand extended in the dark by someone who didn't care about his clumsy presentation, his lack of eye contact, or his monotonous voice. Someone who had looked through the flawed packaging and seen the value of the content. For the first time, Lucas felt that his map could, in fact, lead him somewhere. When he told Mila, she cried. These were not tears of sadness, but of a relief so profound it seemed to have come from her soul. I told you, my son, she said, hugging him tightly. I told you someone would see. The change was this, the discovery that he didn't need to change himself, but to find the place where his authenticity was, finally, an asset. New York was a sensory assault, a chaos of sirens, lights, and crowds that threatened to overwhelm Lucas at every corner. But inside the glass and steel building of the Sterling Group, he found an unexpected sanctuary. As promised, his office was a small room at the end of a hallway, far from the noise of the trading floor and the bustle of the main floor. It had a window overlooking the sky, a large desk, and 3 computer monitors. It was paradise. Isabella Carter was exactly like her emails, direct, efficient, and focused. I don't care about elevator talk, Lucas, she said at their first meeting. I don't care if you eat lunch at your desk or wear headphones all day. I care about results. Your numbers are good. Prove it wasn't luck. The first few weeks were a test. Isabella's team, a group of brilliant and competitive analysts like Oliver Freitas and Zoe Aiden, looked at Lucas with skepticism. He was the weird guy the boss had mysteriously hired. He didn't participate in conversations about sports, didn't go to happy hours. He just worked silently with an intensity that bordered on obsession. His first small victory came in the form of a report. Isabella had given him a data set on an obscure technology company that everyone considered a dead investment. For a week, Lucas delved into the company's source code, bug reports, and engineer hiring patterns he found on professional networks. He ignored the traditional financial reports. In his final analysis, he pointed to a newly registered patent and a pattern of acquisitions of small startups that indicated the company was about to launch a disruptive technology. He recommended an aggressive buy. This is crazy, said Oliver Freitas at the meeting. All indicators point to bankruptcy. Isabella Carter looked at Lucas, then at the report. Let's buy, she said, her voice leaving no room for discussion. 2 weeks later, the company announced its new technology. The shares soared more than 300%. This was the first of many small victories. Gradually, the team's skepticism turned to respect. They started looking for him, not to chat, but to get his perspective. Lucas, can you take a look at this data? There's something I'm not seeing. He became the team's secret eye, the man who saw the patterns everyone else missed. A word of recognition from a colleague, a nod from Isabella, the confidence of receiving increasingly complex projects. These were his achievements. One day, Zoe Aiden knocked on his door. Hey, Lucas, that report of yours on the tech company, it was brilliant. How did you see that? Lucas, without taking his eyes off the screen, replied factually, financial reports reflect the past. Code and patents reflect the future. It's more logical to look to the future. Zoe smiled. It was the first time someone in New York had smiled at him without a hint of strangeness. It was a small victory, but to Lucas, it seemed immense. He was finding his place, not by changing who he was, but by being exactly who he was, in an environment that finally understood that an analyst's value wasn't in his handshake, but in the clarity of his vision. Over time, success on Wall Street brought Lucas a calm he had never known. Validation didn't come from applause or effusive praise, but from the undeniable logic of his results. His name began to circulate in the highest financial circles, not as a personality, but as a kind of data oracle, a mind that operated on a different plane. He didn't become more sociable or charismatic. He remained the quiet man who preferred the company of spreadsheets to people. But something inside him had changed. The shame that had accompanied him throughout his life, the feeling of being a wrong version of a human being, began to dissipate. He looked back at the little boy who lined up toy cars by color, at the teenager who hid in books, at the young man humiliated on a stage, and saw not a series of failures, but a consistent journey. He had always been the same person. What changed was the world around him, or at least the small corner of the world he now inhabited. One night, calling his mother, he tried to put this transformation into words. "Mom," he said, his voice still, monotonous, but with a different weight. "Remember when you told me my mind was beautiful? I think I'm starting to believe it." Mila, on the other end of the line, was silent for a moment, and Lucas could hear the soft sound of her crying. "I always believed it, my son. It's the world that took a while to realize it." This deep reflection led him to recognize that his strength came because of his autism, not in spite of it. His ability to hyperfocus, his pattern recognition skills, his indifference to social pressures, and the herd mentality that so often led to bubbles and financial crises. These were the tools that made him an exceptional analyst. They were characteristics of his autism. True acceptance wasn't realizing he could be normal, but understanding that his abnormality was, in fact, his superpower in the right context. He began to use his position to make a difference. The Sterling Group, under Isabella's influence and Lucas's success, launched a recruitment program focused on neurodivergent talent, creating a work environment that accommodated different ways of thinking and working. Lucas, reluctantly at first, became a mentor to the newcomers. He didn't give them advice on how to fit in. He gave them advice on how to find places where they didn't have to. He taught them to transform their sensitivities into tools and their obsessions into expertise. That auditorium, Francesco Silva's laughter, was still a painful memory. But now it had a different frame. It was no longer the story of his greatest humiliation. It was the prologue to his true story. The ignition point that forced him to stop trying to enter doors that were closed to him and instead find the one door that had been custom-built for his unique key. The closing of the circle came unexpectedly, not in a dramatic confrontation, but in a financial newspaper headline. Silva Corp faces crisis after ignoring signs of contraction in the tech market. Lucas read the article in his quiet office. The crisis at Francesco Silva's company was caused precisely by the failure to predict the market shift that Lucas's Nexus model had predicted 2 years in advance, the same model that had been ridiculed and dismissed on the university stage. There was no feeling of revenge, of "I told you so." There was something deeper, a calm and definitive validation. The truth had revealed itself, not through words, but through data. A few weeks later, the Sterling Group was hired to advise on the restructuring of Silva Corp. The team assigned to the task was, of course, Isabella Carter's. In one of the preliminary video conference meetings, Francesco Silva's face appeared on the screen. He looked older, wearier. His eyes scanned the faces of the Sterling Group analysts. For a moment they stopped on Lucas. There was no recognition, only the vacant stare of a man trying to memorize the faces of those he hoped would save his empire. And at that moment, Lucas realized that the true victory wasn't being recognized by Francesco. The true victory was no longer needing his approval or anyone like him. His pain hadn't completely disappeared. Social anxiety was still there. Sensory overload was still a constant threat. But now he had tools, he had a supportive environment, and most importantly, he had self-acceptance. He didn't need to be cured of himself. The world needed to be cured of its narrow view of what it means to be talented, of what it means to be valuable. Hope, he understood, wasn't the promise of a future without pain, but the certainty that even with the scars, it was possible to build a life of purpose and meaning. He was no longer the autistic boy who was ridiculed by a billionaire. He was Lucas Jones Holm, the lead analyst whom Wall Street hired because his unique vision of the world wasn't a disability, but an extraordinary advantage. And that was a truth that no laughter, no matter how loud, could shake. His story was proof that sometimes the minds that think differently are the only ones capable of truly changing the game. The world doesn't need more copies. It desperately needs more originals. Lucas's journey reminds us that a person's value often hides where society least expects to find it. If this story touched you in some way, if it made you think or feel, please like, comment with your reflections, and subscribe to the channel. Your interaction helps this message reach more people. And maybe, today, someone needs to hear that. Being different isn't a problem to be fixed, but a strength to be discovered.